Last week, Aussie cricket opener David Warner scored a century in the Sheffield Shield. A lot of comments on social media attributed the runs to the absence of Stuart Broad. Lockie, what was the Stuart Broad effect?
A lot of comments online said that he was in his head, and the fact that he only got average 9.5 for the whole summer over the 5 tests, and that was one of the lowest scores of any test cricketer in an opening series.
That mind games could have such an impact on the performance of one of our best players is why we're talking to our next guest, psychologist, author and philosopher Carlos Camacho. Carlos, welcome to the Weekend Beat.
Thank you for having me.
Carlos, sports psychology is nothing new. It's been around for years. Can you tell us a bit about the history of psychology in sports?
Yes, I mean, professional sports psychology, of course, has not been around for that long because psychology as a discipline has only started really maybe about 100 years ago, and it's a bit of a branch of philosophy, and that's why I'm interested in both. Now, sports psychology has always been around, however, because we can't separate mind and body. They're both one. So even in ancient Greek times when athletes competed, there would be also a mind game happening. And we see that a lot, obviously, in some sports more than others. We see that in boxing, in the press conferences when they speak to each other and so forth. Today, sports psychologists use the mind as well as preparation for the game or the competition.
So for the example of David Warner, say, how could he possibly have been better prepared for Stuart Broad?
Beauty of sport is that it's like life within a few minutes. In footy, obviously, it's 80 minutes. In soccer, it's 90. In cricket, it could be 5 days. But it's still a mini lifetime because there's spanners in the works. You're in front, then you're behind. A third party can involve like an umpire and gives you a bad decision. You have to deal with it. Now, there's no preparation enough for any of this because it's unpredictable. But if it's true that Stuart Broad got into Warner's head, of course, Warner would probably deny this. But if it's true, after the second test, he probably should have done something about it. What he could have done is actively, firstly, decide that Stuart Broad is not going to affect him, that he's going to play him as if he's anybody else. Because once we get in the ring, for example, against someone that we feel are going to beat us, we've already lost.
So what are some of the techniques used in sports psychology?
In this case, for example, going back to Warner, he would have been able to sit with his sports psychologist and say, look, firstly, I'm going to be sincere. Stuart Broad's in my head. That's the first thing he's got to decide to do.
Admitting it.
Yes.
He has to admit it. That's right. Once you admit it, then we can start looking for some answers. Now, what is it about Stuart Broad? Of course, there are some characters that are very good in getting into people's heads, and we know many of those. You know, we had our own. Shane Warne, for example, was great because they're very good at what they do, and in addition to that, they're very confident. They celebrate when they get you out. They say things in the press, and therefore the others need to know how to deal with that. Warner decisively knew that he was going to come across Stuart Broad because he's an opener, so is Stuart Broad. There's no way out of this. What he needs to do is visualise in order to be able to bring down Stuart Broad as just a bowler. No fear coming to that. So play the ball, not the man.
Exactly. Now, you've mentioned the visualisation there. Can you go a little bit more in depth about what exactly that means?
Yeah, it's a wonderful thing because what we've noticed through research is that the brain behaves exactly the same whether you're visualizing doing something or actually doing it. Isn't that incredible? And we all know many cases of ourselves domestically. We might think of a joke that someone told us 10 years ago and laugh as if we're hearing it today. Think of a memory or so forth, or think of someone we love and feel that love or whatever it may be, or think of someone that we dislike like Stuart Broad and get that fear. And that's what happened to Warner. The beauty of that, it can also be used for good, not only for evil. So it's important to be able to use visualization and use the fact that the brain behaves the same. So what we can do is, if we can train 3 hours batting or hitting a ball or kicking a ball, because the body has limits, we can do 3 hours more visualization and therefore have an advantage over the opposition. The brain behaves the same. It's like a computer. Whatever you put in it, it's going to give you something back. So with Warner, he unconsciously or indirectly already put that fear in himself.
In his own head.
That's right. And the brain's doing what it does. Okay, you're fearful of this guy. I'm going to leave it that way until you change that. Let's visualize that this guy is not in my head. He's nothing. He's just a bowler. I'm going to play him the same as everyone else. Visualize it, practice it, and then once you get into the real game, the brain will follow that. It's just like kicking a ball, but you need to practice it.
And now going forward, can you give out the listeners out there some tips on winning?
Winning is great, but in order to be successful at anything, and especially sport, we have to know how to lose. And we don't call it losing, we call it learning. How am I going to use what's just happened in order to better myself?
And what do you think about some of the sports out there, the kids out there that are getting taught at a young age that winning isn't everything, that they don't celebrate? Some of the sports out there don't celebrate winning or losing. They get participation awards. That, to me, that doesn't set, because life is not all sunshine and rainbows. There are going to be disappointments.
Yes.
There are going to be overjoyous moments. But to me, from a sporting sense, teaching the young kids at a young age that, we're just giving you a participation medal, it doesn't really set them up well for life, even in the sporting sense.
Right. Look, I agree. There is a change, obviously, within our society, and there's a lot more inclusion, which that is great. You know, everyone should have the opportunity to participate and compete. The thing is that there's different types of competitions, and that's, as a parent, we have to make sure that promote, but we also try to push our kids into what's about right for them without setting them up for failure. Now, yes, life isn't like that, and I've spoken to a lot of people that have been cocooned in that sense, even people that not only in sport but in other areas of life that in a way safeguarded through their parents or whoever it may be, and then suddenly they're on their own, and life isn't like that. And so it's good to know those skills. And if you look at autobiographies and biographies of successful people, most of them have had to struggle, because once they get to doing what they do best, they've had the ups and downs. Look at the Venus and Serena Williams. They used to play in basketball courts with a string, no net. A few times their father notes that he had to jump on both girls when they were 8 and 9 because there was a drive-by. So imagine that girl growing up in that situation. Once they get to Wimbledon, do you think it's going to bother them that the crowd's booing them, or
No,
or that
not
they
at all.
got a bad decision on that? They're so strong. Obviously, this is an extreme case, you know, and with boxers, it's a wonderful story. You know, the poor boxer that rose to the top. And in some sports, it's a little bit different, but the struggle is good. And we just need to make sure we're there for them when they don't win. They don't need a participation award. As a parent, as a friend, as a family member, as a coach, that's when you come in and say, look, you've done well. This is what you need to do to improve.
Yes.
But there's no award. It's like Jimmy Barnes says, there's no second prize.
No, exactly.
Well, thank you, Carlos Camacho, for those insights today. I'd love to have you back on the show, maybe next time, to discuss the psychology of sports supporters and the fan clubs out there.
Oh, that's interesting. Part 2.
I
Tease
love
out there, Sarah, for the listeners.
That's all we have time for today. Thank you to psychologist, philosopher and author Carlos Camacho. We'll look forward to seeing you again soon.